Hey, what's up? So, how do you pace yourself in the game of entrepreneurship in this strange intellectual ultra marathon where you don't know where it's going to end? It's never going to end, right? You're just cranking along, launch to launch. It's hard. How fast should you go? So, this is something I've been asking myself a lot because I've been building an AI Chrome extension for over half a year at this point, and I'm still really enthused with it. I'm so engaged with it. I'm really excited by it, even though I don't have a ton of traction at the moment. But in the past, I've had issues with pacing where I've burnt out. Whatever I've been working on was distinctly not fun at all. And that's a terrible situation to be in. You never want to be in a situation where you're working on something and then you wake up and you just completely do not feel like working on that thing week after week after week. It's just utterly miserable. It's a terrible waste of a life, of your spiritual energy. Like, you don't want to be doing that. So how do you avoid burnout? Well, this is not specifically about burnout. I'm going to talk about pacing. I'm going to talk about my preferred schedule, and I'm going to talk about some kind of philosophical backing to why you might want to kind of back off on your schedule and go at a more kind of a maybe not relaxed, but not a compulsively driven forward pace, and also why you might want to maybe release your grip on the particular outcome that you're seeking and rather try to embrace the process a little bit more and kind of remain open, dilate your perception a little bit, and just kind of take it as it comes. So where to begin with this? So I was actually on a hike. I'm on a hike right now, of course, but I was on a hike a couple weeks ago, and I was with a friend of mine, and we were going up a super steep hike. It was essentially, 1,000 meters of stairs, basically straight up. It was a Stairmaster for like 2 hours, and our pace was initially very fast. So we were get out of the wind here if I can. Yeah, so we were really trucking it. We were, going up the stairs, the path, the really steep path, and then we would basically take a break for like a minute. We just sit there on the rocks. Then the sun came out. It was hot, and it was very start and stop, right? A little sprint, stop. And then I realized that what we were doing was kind of silly. So I said, all right, let's slow the pace way down. And we did. We were going, one step up, take a breather, one more step, pole. If you climb Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, that is what they will tell you, the guides walking up. That means slowly. So what happens when you slow your pace dramatically like that? Well, it feels absolutely ridiculous at first. You're like, why am I going at this childlike pace? I feel like I should be going forward. I want to go forward, especially maybe if you're a kind of like a more aggressive type, or you're doing an entrepreneurial thing. You want to get it. You want to go. And that's totally fine. There's definitely times for that. And going fast is certainly not a bad thing inherently. But there's a sort of beauty to slowing down, or not even necessarily slowing down. It's a subtle thing I'm about to say. But that is not being compulsively driven forward, and rather advancing at a pace where you're completely balanced. You're not leaning forward so much that you're kind of off balance in the sense of being too narrowly focused and pursuing something, the summit or whatever, with too narrow of a focus that you're ignoring everything else. Okay, because when you go faster, your perception is narrowed in a sense. And if you can slow down and proceed at that pace as though you were a person with no particular destination, but you're still moving forward, then the experience of walking or of doing whatever you're currently doing qualitatively changes. And I didn't come up with this. This is actually a meditation technique. I forget where I read about it, in some meditation book back in the day. But basically, it's a way of walking in a meditative way, to do so as though you had no particular destination. Now, clearly, you want to know exactly where you're going. You want to be on a very directed path. But I'm talking more about the pacing here. So try this out. Next time you're walking, it's going to feel totally weird, but just try to slow down your pace. to the point where you're not being pulled forward compulsively. It's a subtle thing, but it's a beautiful thing. Once you can get into it and kind of break the shackles of feeling, compulsively driven forward by the societally imposed kind of just force that tells us to proceed forward at maximum speed. Anyway, so why am I talking about all this? That can be applied, I think, to entrepreneurship. Now, as I said, there's a time for speed, obviously. If you have a great plan and you're really excited to get going on it, and you've already done the dilated perception thing, and you just have to execute, that's amazing. Those are some of the times I love best. But on the other times, when you don't know exactly what you're going to do and you want to stay open to possibility, and you're still feeling out the space in the very dynamic realm of entrepreneurship and vast uncertainty, then proceeding at a pace that you're comfortable with, that you can sustain for a long time, where your focus is not so narrow that you miss opportunities, you miss other paths that you could take, you miss other local and global maxima that you could achieve, is really is an amazing thing to do. And so that's what I've been trying to do. And so yeah, anyway, kind of a rough transition, but I'll tell you what my favorite schedule has been for achieving this. And it's always a work in progress. I'm always experimenting with it. But, well, recently I've been fairly consistent with this schedule. And basically the schedule is when I get up, I do 4 hours of the highest ROI task that I've outlined for myself the day before or the week before or whatever. So I get up, I don't have this crazy prolonged morning routine. I just hydrate, which is actually very important for your cognitive functioning. And I get some outside light. I actually try to be outside as much as I possibly can during the day, like even working and stuff outside. And then I jump right into a 4-hour session, phone in the other room ideally, and I just knock out that most important set of items. And then, I work out, I eat, and then I do some more work. But the work that I do in the afternoon tends to be a little bit different qualitatively. It's just, sometimes I'll go back into coding, but generally speaking, I find that if I get back into coding, if I get back into the weeds later in the day, where the better part of my brain is exhausted, right? It's very, there's this kind of idea that programmers only have 4.5 hours maybe of really effective programming work in them per day. I find that more or less to be true. Then I often find myself working on something that's unnecessary, or I'm doing it the wrong way. There's just very diminishing returns after that point. And sometimes it can put you in the wrong direction. It doesn't always advance you to continue working. Sometimes it makes you go backwards. So in the afternoon, rather than just staying in the weeds, what I'll do is I'll often shift gears to strategy, to planning, to research. And I think there's some studies that show that when you're more tired, you're more effective at that sort of creative work than the kind of really focused, minutia, whatever kind of programming you're doing. And that seems to work really well for me, to get my brain into a state that's very calm, that's not feeling that stress of, oh, you have to fix these bugs, you have to respond to this thing or whatever, but rather getting into that state where ideas can come, where you can put your own, GPT to work, so to speak, and generate really high quality outputs, strategic outputs, planning, whatever, maybe some research. So that's been really effective for me. And, it's not always like that. Sometimes if I know exactly what I'm doing, I'm making a feature or whatever it is, I'll just go all day long. But I find when I have this balance of working on the first 4 hours, most important single implementation related task, and then kind of backing off of that in the afternoon and doing more strategic research, maybe you have to change the copy in the website or whatever it is, stuff like that, has been really effective. And then paired with that, getting outside as much as possible, doing stuff like this, which is a little unusual. I don't usually go on longer hikes in the afternoon, but I do a random number of amount of exercise per day, which I guess I could talk about in another video. But today was a long day, so for work, a lot of workouts today. But yeah, so I just want to touch on the philosophical backing of some of this stuff that I'm talking about in terms of pacing and also focusing on the process. So let's actually jump into that real quick. So if you slow down, part of it's not just to slow down, but part of it actually, in my opinion, is best seen as focusing not on the fruit of the outcome. So not chasing your particular goal, like maybe you're planning for a Hacker News launch, you're building a some kind of a software product, or a product hunt launch or something like that, and it has to go right, and you're just completely focused on this one thing. In my mind, part of the slowing it down a little bit mentality is backing away from that and focusing on the process. So you can define your goal very concretely, launch on Hacker News, launch on whatever, have a certain number of users, whatever the specific thing is, that's fine. But clinging onto that compulsively and needing that to work out has sort of a sabotaging effect. Now, this may or not be technically true, but hear me out. I think there's a reason why it's not going to be helping you a lot of the time. And by the way, this stems from the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Hindu spiritual text, where one of the main points is that you should not be focusing on the basically exactly what I said. Don't focus on the fruit of your outcome. Focus on the process itself as an act of devotion to God. Now, there's other prescriptions in that book, but that's kind of the main takeaway, at least for me. And adopting that mindset, I think, is helpful, because when you can take your eye off a very narrowly defined ball and not be striving for that outcome, and you kind of slow your pace accordingly. I mean, you don't technically have to slow your pace for that, but anyway, when you dilate your perception a little bit and focus on, you're essentially more present and not in the future, then you're open. You're open to other paths, you're open to other opportunities, other things that arise. And you're not living in this compulsive kind of a fantasy future world. So it's easier said than done to do that, because clearly we all have goals. That's probably why you're pursuing whatever it is you're pursuing, for some tangible outcome. But striking that fine balance is something that's not easy, but is really worthwhile. And again, try that walking exercise. It's a good illustration of that, because if you go for a hike, clearly you have a goal, but if you can practice walking as though that were the actual process, you're not driven for it. It's a subtle thing I'm trying to communicate here. I hope I'm getting the point across. But try that out. I think it's a really it's a useful analogy for me, at least. And there's a related analogy from the Sermon on the Mount. I don't remember the exact quote, but Jesus apparently said, how does the quote go? I forget exactly, but it's like, look at the lilies of the field, they toil not, they do not spin. Look how they grow, they toil not, they do not spin. Basically, they're just chilling. Look at the flowers in the field, they're not striving for this, they're not worried about that. They're just kind of progressing at their own pace. They're growing at their own pace. So yeah, emulate the flowers in the field as much as you can. To not be trapped in that weird, compulsive, mind-dominated future world that's really maybe holding you back from the miracle of the present moment, which is where everything happens. So anyway, just wanted to share my thoughts there. I'm really grateful that this time I have not burned out. I'm over half a year into building this Chrome extension, and even though I haven't had huge success with it yet, it's still super fun. I'm still very optimistic about it. And yeah, I want to share more about the journey, and I'll talk more about the specific product. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of get back in the swing of making videos, not get back into it, basically get into it for the first time consistently. So yeah, sorry if this was a little long-winded. But yeah, just here on this hike, and I was like, you know what, let me bust one of these out. So there you go. Anyway, gonna finish this hike up and get a bite to eat. Talk to you later.